All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you're re-energized and excited about our next panel discussion. Our theme today is AI, FYI, what you need to know about artificial intelligence in the field of planning. This session is approved for continuing legal education credits, so attorneys should have received a CLE form at check-in. All of our planners, landscape architects, and lead professionals may also receive credit. So please see the continuing education table in the foyer for more information. We want to start by thanking our session sponsor, Lamar Advertising, and all of the summit sponsors who are listed in your program and in the slideshows between the sessions. The summit would not be possible without their support. One second, excuse me, one moment. I'm missing something. Hold on. I missed my intro. Let's see what I can, still typing. Let's see what I can come up with today. Thank you, ChatGPT. In today's rapidly evolving landscape, the integration of artificial intelligence into community planning processes stands as both a promise and a challenge. As we gather here, it's crucial to recognize the pivotal role AI plays in reshaping our approach to development, offering opportunities for smarter, data-driven decision-making. Alongside its transformative potential, AI also brings forth ethical and practical considerations that demand our attention. From predictive analytics guiding infrastructure development to AI-powered community engagement tools ensuring inclusivity, the applications are vast and varied. We must be mindful of issues like algorithmic bias, job displacement, and privacy concerns. Through this session, we aim to equip you with the knowledge and tools necessary to harness AI's potential while ensuring ethical, equitable outcomes. Our panel. Dr. Thomas W. Sanchez is a professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning at Texas A&M University. His most recent books include Networks in the Knowledge Economy with Denise Bedford and Planning Knowledge and Research. His forthcoming book, AI for Urban Planning, will be published by Routledge in 2025. Sanchez serves as the American Planning Association Education Committee Chair and as a member of APA's Artificial Intelligence Foresight Community. Sagar Shah, Senior Manager of Knowledge and Career Programs at the American Planning Association, is a prominent advocate for health equity through planning. Within APA, he plays a key role in the Foresight team, examining the impact of disruptors like emerging technologies such as AI on the planning field. Nicholas Mate. Nicholas, an associate professor at Tulane University's Computer Science Department and co-director of the Tulane Center for Community Engage Artificial Intelligence, specializes in artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, and their societal impacts with extensive research contributions and co-authorship of Computing and Technology Ethics, Engaging Through Science Fiction from MIT Press, alongside over 100 scientific papers in AI research. So let's begin our conversation with AI in the field of planning. Tom, you're up first.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. Quick show of hands. I can see most of you. How many of you know of or are familiar with machine learning? So a good number of hands. How about neural networks? Couple, few. Okay, good. Natural language processing? Few too. And computer vision. A couple. Okay. I start off with those mainly because I see those as kind of some of the main areas for application to planning, and wanted to kind of gauge the familiarity with the audience. I'm always tempted to start this presentation with this graphic and, in this outline, but then I figure, with all the talk about, the doom and gloom with potential with AI, but I decide to use this instead. Because the imagery is more kind of helpful, it's nice, it's friendly. And so what I'm going to talk about real briefly is I'm going to give some background on AI, talk about some, not too long, but mention some what I call methods on the menu, and then AI in practice and some questions, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end of the session. Okay, brief history. And the main point here is really about the pace of change we've seen. So the Deck Writer 2 on the left was what I started my computer programming on. No processing power, no memory, no storage. We had to use that acoustic coupler modem in the middle there to connect to a server or a central processing. And then a few years later, actually got to the desktop environment, and was starting to do a little bit of GIS, and this was without dot matrix printers. This was the output for the maps at the time. And the point isn't that I'm old. The point is that how rapidly these things are changing, because, within my career, kind of, what I've seen and some of the younger people out there, I don't think we can even really imagine what kind of tools you're going to be using kind of, in your career a little bit later on. And then here's where, we are today with this device, with literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of times, the processing power, and storage and capability of those early computers. I think it's actually very amazing. Okay. Real quick, again, a little more background. We did with the American Planning Association, we did a survey of APA members just to kind of gauge kind of level of experience and knowledge and perspective about AI. And a couple of questions in that survey involved kind of how familiar they were with, or what they thought their kind of self-reported level of skills were with just data analysis and then with AI. And so on the left there, the chart shows kind of, some fairly high levels of, of skills related to data analysis, related to planning, and lower levels related to AI, which we would expect. But then we compare that to what they felt the significance of AI was going to be for planning in the future, and we can see where that really kind of leans towards, and on the scale there being 0, like no significance, and 5 being very significant. So even though a lot of the respondents weren't that familiar with AI, they were still feeling that in the future it's going to have an impact on planning and the planning profession. Some top areas real quick on what they identified as AI having a specific impact on, transportation, plan review, data analysis, environment, demographics, kind of those areas where we've got data and are fairly labor intensive. And for the unsuitable areas, the one that really pops out there is community involvement. And mainly the reason reasons for that were, the potential loss of that social, kind of that human touch in that process, engaging with the community and, and having exchanges kind of on a personal basis. Didn't really want to substitute that for just gathering data based on computer programs. And so I'm not gonna run through all of this, but again, kind of the main areas that I've seen that have a potential to contribute to planning. We've got the machine learning side, which we're already doing some of that. Computer vision, I'll mention quickly a example of how that's being used. Neural networks on the prediction side or a pattern detection side, and then natural language processing, which we've seen just kind of explode in the last year or two in working with text analysis, either in interpretation as well as generation of text data. These are some examples of what I call AI in the city. And so we've got cases of autonomous vehicles being tested in several cities, one of which being San Francisco, also Austin's running a program, several others where AI obviously plays a big role in how these vehicles navigate these cities. Smart city initiatives, we've all kind of heard of what's happening with that, with lots of new technologies being embedded in the cities, sensors for gathering data and as part of optimization and operationalizing kind of urban dynamics. In Singapore, they've really been doing a lot with digital twin technologies or simulations that can be used for modeling urban spaces and looking at the interface between different objects or elements within those urban areas. Predictive policing for safety in LA, which ran into actually quite a bit of opposition from the community because of issues around historical bias. So that has since kind of changed direction a bit. And then Internet of Things, which is happening in several cities, but Barcelona being been doing some very interesting things around that in the urban space. And some examples so those were AI in the city, and then this is few examples I'm going to run through real quickly about AI being used for planning of cities. And so let's see. So one is sentiment analysis, kind of scraping social media data and to get comments and look at what the community is saying about urban services being provided by the city. And so what these methods allow is both sentiment, like good, bad, neutral, as well as the topics. And this particular data, like 5 million messages that were scraped for the city of Long Beach, this data happened to be during the time of COVID. And so the leading topic had to do with public health. Where can I get tested? Where can I get vaccinated? Questions like that. And so that emerges as a top topic. Also, Tuscaloosa is doing some interesting things around with computer vision. They've they have I'm sorry, I'm blanking out here. They're using cameras, or they've fitted cameras on the garbage trucks within the city, so that they could, you've got regular routes going throughout the city, and what they're using is computer vision to capture the conditions of neighborhoods, conditions of roads, conditions of the property, looking for poor condition issues, where there needs to be, that need to be addressed, either from kind of a code enforcement standpoint or from just overall neighborhood conditions. And so one of the concerns about this was, okay, are we going to end up classifying some of these neighborhoods as distressed or undesirable, which we don't want. And in talking with the city, what they've said is really what they want to use this as a tool to identify those areas that need resources. And so that will be, this project will be interesting to keep an eye on. And then another project that's used for more on the data analysis side, in looking at how to adjust boundaries in districts so they don't become too homogeneous. And so we can kind of think of gerrymandering as one of the examples. And so they're looking at the composition of households within Ector County, so characteristics of the kids and kind of other levels of disadvantage in those neighborhoods, and making sure that all the wealthier households aren't isolated into the better funded school districts compared to other groups of households. So they're able to do this kind of on a block by block basis, a lot of data that's not available from the student records. And so they're looking at lots of different conditions within those neighborhoods, and then comparing that to the school district boundaries, and then adjusting those when they see those getting out of balance. And so I think a real interesting application with important social implications. And so finally, some questions, and I think there are lots of questions, but I think in my work and looking at AI for planning is really kind of having to step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish with planning? What kinds of questions are we answering? What kinds of data should we be using? What's the problem with some of the historical data that we've been using? Because we don't want to use that. We don't want to feed in, data from the past where we've had segregated neighborhoods and other forms of discrimination, feed those into our AI models and give us those same kind of recommendations. And so it's really kind of looking at planning workflows and say, where are those different areas that we need to keep an eye on to avoid things like bias, and to make sure that we're being accountable and transparent about how we're performing analyses. And I think it's been a real interesting process for me, about planning profession. And then how do we prepare? And this is really, a lot of this is new to most of us, or all of us. And so it's really about learning more about kind of terminology, the technology, kind of what it does, what it can't do, and just really kind of getting familiar with it, and then looking at it in terms of how can we use it as a tool within our particular roles or responsibilities. Other challenges, we need more data, we're going to need training, we're going to need a plan. There is talk about, ethics issues, which Sagar will be talking about. So there are a handful of other things that I think come out of this still being new to us. And what's next? That's a great question. as far as how fast things have been changing and kind of what's the next technology that's coming along. And to wrap up, I used AI to generate some images. The prompt was, show me some planners in the office, doing some kind of technical work with computers. Anybody see any issues with what it came back with here? All white guys with ties on, in the office. So this was at the time Midjourney's idea of what planners look like that are working with computers. I don't think that's the case, but just me. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here after lunch. My name is Sagar Shah, and I am a senior manager at American Planning Association. And today I'm going to talk about ethics in AI, a couple of things that Tom mentioned. I'll do something similar. But before I talk about it, I would like to know how would you describe your initial impressions of its ethical concerns when it comes to AI? Are you comfortable with it, that you trust that AI technologies are generally used responsibly? You are unsure. That means you have doubts or questions. Or are you concerned that you feel uneasy or worried? So with the show of hands, how many of you are comfortable with ethical concerns about AI? None of you. Okay. This is what I've seen other places as well. And if you look at the national survey, it's the same thing. How many of you are unsure? You have doubts or questions about it? Okay, that's good. What about concerned? So I think there are more people who are unsure than concerned, which is good. But I'm glad that you are here. So I'm the person who is unsure as well. If you are unsure or concerned, this is a good way of knowing more about it, right? That's how you have more certainty or remove your concerns. So thank you for being here. So today I'll do three things. I will talk about challenges in AI with focus on ethics. I'll talk about some of the ways we can sort of address those challenges. And then I'll talk about some of the resources very quickly in terms of that we have developed to help planners use AI in their work. But before I talk about challenges, one disclaimer. I know we started this conference with a great presentation from Kona about hope and positivity. And some of the things that I'll talk, since I'm talking about challenges, it's going to be a little bit negative, right? It may maybe increase your concerns. But I would like to preface it by saying that, as Tom has showed and Nick will talk about as well, AI is being used in very different ways in our daily life, in our work. It has revolutionized industries from medicine to agriculture, etc. So there are a lot of benefits and opportunities to it. So I don't want my speak to be all negative in nature. So that's the disclaimer. So let's talk about, I have sort of 6 challenges in AI. The first one is autonomous decision making, which relates to how AI systems make their decisions autonomously without human intervention, right? And there are good things about that because it can be faster, it can improve efficiency, it can reduce costs. But there is a flip side as well, right? It can cause harm to human beings. Let's see an example where this study that you see was published in 2016, where researchers looked at the risk assessment algorithms that were being used in criminal justice systems, right? And the purpose of these algorithms was to see whether what kind of sentencing should a defendant get, and should that person is eligible for parole, etc. And what the researchers found was that the algorithms were saying that the black people were more likely to commit crimes in the future than their white counterparts, even while keeping everything else same, including background, socioeconomic, everything is same. That was the prediction of the algorithm, and that's why black people were getting more harsher punishments, right? So AI was making an autonomous decision, and which was impacting very negatively to people's lives, especially black people. So this is something that we need to take care of, and I think a lot of people have suggested developing guidelines and ethical frameworks. A lot of research and a lot of work is going on in terms of developing these frameworks, but it's something that we need to be aware about when we do. Let me go to the second one, bias in AI. Tom talked a little bit about it. This is the most researched and sort of most talked about challenge in AI. It is about how AI has biases, and some of that biases are transferred from us, right? We have our own biases, and when we develop the AI systems, our biases are transferred to them, to the AI, and sometimes it's even like it's elevated, it's amplified, and it can be in various forms, right? It can be gender bias, race bias, and it can be expressed when AI uses it into selection bias, exclusion bias, confirmation biases. Now let me show you a couple of examples. And many of you may know about this study, right? Bloomberg did a very famous study. It was very well read in last year, where they asked AI to create images of various professions. Tom asked planners. What they did was they asked, create a color photo of an engineer. And this is what AI came up with, right? You see, there's a problem. Similar to the planners, there is not a single women here, and we know that there are a lot of women who are engineers. So this is sort of an example of how AI biases are perpetuated in AI. Another example, again, gender bias, is when they asked to create images of high-paying occupations such as doctors or judges or engineers. And as you can see in the top row, all the images that they created were mainly men, right? Which is represented by the darker green color in the top row. And when they asked to create images of low-paying occupations like teachers, housekeepers, cashiers, fast food workers, they were female, right? So there was like complete bias in terms of how it was creating images. Let's talk about the racial bias integrated into AI systems, right? In the same study, they asked AI to create photo of fast food workers. And as you can see, the images that were created are all black men and women in fast food worker uniforms. Similarly, when they asked to create photos of social workers, it was majority black women. So, and if you look at the data from US Bureau of Labor Statistics, we see 77% of fast food workers in the US are white. But when you ask AI, that's not what is reflected. And when you see over 65% of social workers in the US are white, but that's not what is reflected in what AI is creating. So this is an example of like how it has our biases, and the data that has been fed to AI, biased data that has been fed to AI leads to such biases. And then this brings me to the next challenge, which is overcorrection, right? So last year, there was a lot of research done and talk about how AI systems are being biased, right? And we need to correct them. And what happened was, yes, the new data was fed into AI to correct the biases that were integrated, but it led to overcorrection. So overcorrection is the phenomena where AI system goes too far in the opposite direction in attempt to address biases, right? And in order to tackle biases and overcorrection, it is very important that we have diverse and unbiased data, which is a tough job to do, and have rigorous testing and evaluation of what is being produced. So let me give you an example of overcorrection. This is a recent sort of analysis. It was not a study, but it was like a news article where people asked Google's Gemini, which is like a generative AI from Google, to create an image of a 1943 German soldier, right, in a form of illustration. And the AI had these images. Because previously it was found that, well, women was not represented, black people were not represented much. Now they're giving 1943 German soldiers as being Asians, women, black, which is we know are not true, right? Here is a photograph of founding fathers, and you can see there are people in color there, which is not true. They also asked, like, create images of Pope, and they created female popes. So there is a lot of like overcorrection happening. So it is very important to have correct type of data that AI can read. So let's talk about privacy and surveillance. This is I think there should be 4 numbers, sorry. I think we all sort of are aware about these issues since we have started using smartphones, so mid-2000s. But this is about collecting your personal data and sometimes sensitive data without your permission to make decisions for you, right? Let's see an example. Clearview AI, many of you may know this example. Clearview AI is a Canadian company which collected images from Canadian adults and children, so collected the images and then was selling it commercially to other companies, which is against the Canadian privacy laws. Facial recognition systems, right, are being used all over the world to sort of provide safety and security to people. But it was found that in jurisdiction in China, they were using facial recognition system to track minority Muslims, track their movements, where they are going, etc. So this issue is there. We need to be very careful and we need to be very vigilant about it. And I think if you go back, it's about using data encryption, user-controlled data sharing, and having transparent data policies. Those things are very important. And when talking about privacy and surveillance, I think it's important to talk about what happened this week, where President Biden sort of signed an executive order to sort of asking TikTok it will be banned if they don't change their ownership within 1 year, right? This follows a lot of countries banning TikTok with the concerns of privacy and surveillance, right? Canada, I think. Canada, UK, India, there are a lot of countries. Even China doesn't allow TikTok. They have a different version of TikTok that they use there by the same company, but they don't use TikTok. So that is sort of an example of how it is being taken care for. The next challenge I want to talk about is accountability and responsibility. And this is about when AI makes a decision, it produces an outcome. Who is responsible and accountable for that outcome and decision making, right? That's a difficult question because AI systems are notoriously complex, they are opaque, and they have, as we saw, a lot of biases and misinformation. So let's say if we are working on Smart Cities initiative and we decide we want to provide the control of public services or infrastructure to a private company or an AI, who would bear the consequences or who would be responsible and accountable if something goes wrong? So those are the questions that we need to think about and we very much work towards solving them. The other example is autonomous vehicles, right? Autonomous vehicles uses AI. And right now, we do not have a truly autonomous car, but there are pilots going on all over the country in different cities. Many of you may know about the example in Phoenix, where the autonomous vehicle drove over a pedestrian, resulting to the death of that pedestrian. And that particular case was litigated last year. And what happened was the backup driver who was sitting behind the wheels pleaded guilty to sort of killing that person, right? So that is something to remember. And somebody told me that when you look at accountability and responsibility, at the end of the chain, there is going to be a human being. And that human being always may be a sort of person who may not have resources to fight the system. So these are the things that are very important to know and think about. Misinformation in AI, we know about fake news, we know about perpetuating false information through deep fakes or altered images and videos that is being done. But something that I would like to mention here is in order to mitigate misinformation, it is very important that we foster media literacy and critical thinking. I think previous panel in this room about managed retreat talked about critical thinking as a skill that is necessary. And the same goes for AI. Here the example is 2022 deepfake video of Zelensky asking soldiers to surrender to Russia, right? This would have like real life consequences, global consequences of these images and deepfakes. Another example is Biden's deepfake robocall that went to voters asking them not to go and vote for presidential primaries. And this being election year, we need to be very vigilant thinking about as I mentioned, we need to use critical thinking. We need to be media literate in order to identify these deepfakes. And there are a lot of resources available in order to find what is deepfake, what is not. Okay, so those were the challenges. Now let's talk about how do we address those challenges, right? The first thing is transparency and explainability. This is about making the decision-making process of AI more transparent and explainable to human beings. And there are various methods available, right? These are just an example, like model interpretation, data provenance, explanation generation. Maybe Nick knows more about these things. I don't know much about these things, but I understand that if you use these methods, the whole purpose of using these methods is to make the decisions that AI make, the predictions that it is making, the data that it is using, the analysis that it is doing, more transparent to humans, more explainable to humans, so that we can sort of understand what is happening in that black box. And there is a way to like sort of evaluate what is happening. AI regulations, last couple of years, we have seen a lot of regulations all over the world on regulating AI, a lot of efforts in regulating AI. At global level, I think EU is the front leader is a leader in sort of regulating AI. OECD has created policies to help countries create policies around generative AI, and then China has banned deepfakes, and some of the states in US as well has. US do not have a comprehensive strategy on AI at federal level, but President Biden did issue executive order on AI Bill of Rights that sort of talks about how we can safely, securely develop, use, and deploy the AI systems. If you look at states, there are a lot of states that have proposed legislations, and there are a lot of states that have enacted legislations around AI. And of course, cities are vigilant as well, especially the larger urban areas are creating regulations around AI. Boston, I think, was the first one to do it, and many cities have followed since. The third thing, only two things more. Third thing is skill building, and I think I talked a little bit about it. It is very important that we upskill ourselves. That means we need to learn new skills. We need to think about AI literacy. Tom mentioned a little bit about that. Critical thinking, as I mentioned, media literacy. All those things we need to sort of learn, right? And that's okay, because when computers came, we did not know how to use computers, but we learned. So we will learn this. It's just that we need to be intentional about it. Stakeholder involvement is very important, that AI is being developed in collaboration with different people, right? It can be developers like who are creating the models, users who are going to use it, regulators, planners, policymakers, elected officials. It is important that we work together and create these systems. Right now, many of the systems are being built by private companies in the research labs. And when it is deployed, of course, in deployed, there is a lot of collaboration happening, but I think it needs to be from the top to the bottom. There should be stakeholder involvement in it. This is sort of a summary. I have time constraints. I'm not going to go deep into it, but there's sort of some recommendations of how to address these challenges. It is about ethical guidelines and learning skills, working together, the things that I've already talked about. I do want to talk about professional ethical code. We all are professionals here, and we abide by ethical code. Or at least even if you're not a certified professional, you have moral lens. So if you look at the AICP Code of Ethics, these are some of the sort of ethics regulations that sort of I identified that are very relevant to the things that I talked about today. So I'm not going to go over it, but there's something that if you're an AICP planner, you should, or a non-AICP planner, you should go and see, because it talks about conscious bias, unconscious biases, how to provide correct information to people, how to not share that information with others, etc. But I would like to highlight the last one, which is we shall not use the product of others' efforts to seek professional recognition, credit, or acclaim, right? And this can be put in the context of AI, because we use AI, and when we use AI, it is important that we disclose where it is used. And I am an AICP planner, so I will say that in making this presentation, I did use AI, right? All the images that you saw came from AI. All the layout and the design of the slides came from AI. I saved 3-4 hours, because that time I spent in making this presentation better, the text better, and thinking about the content. So it did help me here, and I would like to disclose it. So if I'm doing other presentation, I would, under the image, I should mention what is the source from where the images are coming. I just didn't for this presentation. Some resources for planner, I will only take 1 minute. I would recommend you to read these two reports. Tom and I co-authored the one in the left-hand one, and then Tom authored the one on the right-hand one. The left one is a white paper on AI and planning, and the right one is sort of provides nuts and bolts of planning practice and how to use artificial intelligence. If you cannot scan the QR code, I saw some people are scanning. If you cannot, don't worry, we can share those with you. We created a training last July on how planners can use ChatGPT. It was a training plus webinar where we had 45 minutes of making people understand like what ChatGPT is, what is generative AI. And last 45 minutes, we sort of worked with them in terms of using ChatGPT in planning practice. So this was we had 500 individuals from 9 countries and had excellent reception in the post-webinar survey. The other thing, and I would like to mention, is the webinar and training, similar format we did to help planners create images using AI, right? And this also had about excellent reception. People were having fun with Midjourney and Bing image creator, etc. So I would recommend you to at least access these courses and look at it. If you want to search them, just type artificial intelligence at planning.org, and you will see a lot of resources. We have been working on AI since last 4 or 5 years. We have podcasts, and we have magazine articles, we have blog posts, we have examples of cities that have used it. I don't know everything that is there, but there is a lot of stuff there. So if you are a planner and want to know more about AI, please go. But yeah, with that I end. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to move this microphone up a little bit because I am obnoxiously tall. All right. So, unlike Sagar, I did not use AI to make my slides, so they're going to be very ugly. But my students don't care about that typically. So I'm Nick Matei. I'm an associate professor. I keep forgetting, they just promoted me, at Tulane University. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Tulane around artificial intelligence. I'll try to touch on a little bit of some broader projects, across the research community that I think intersect with planning and what I think might interest y'all here. Don't worry, I'm not going to get up here and make you do math after lunch or anything like that, but I will try to talk, pretty at a high level about some of these things. And so, the big thing, this AI is new space that a lot of people are kind of worried about, is this idea of generative AI, right? Which is what we saw in the intro video with Aaron, and everything else is, there's all these startup companies. I'm not even sure if I heard of all of these, but I did manage to put them all on my slides. There's about 7 billion generative AI companies out there right now. So generative AI is, I guess, distinct from what I would have even learned what is AI when I was in college, a little while ago, not that long ago, I guess, because this is very much kind of a new field even for us that sort of work in it regularly. A lot more, I think, we've talked about, I think, the chat stuff and the image generation stuff a lot so far. The other thing that I'd like to sort of talk about is, the AI tools that we use are sort of everywhere. The products you find on Amazon, the ways that listings are ordered on eBay, the things that you listen to next on Pandora, the things that you watch on Netflix, the people you date, the things you read, the places you stay, the things you eat, the places you go on vacation, also the news you read. All of these are mediated in some way through either what we call a recommender system or something that's doing some dynamic type responses to what you're looking at, what you're watching. And so it's not just the generative AI, it's a lot of, all the services that you use every day. And one of the things that I like to talk about is it's not so much the technology that I think, at least I have a problem with, maybe you guys are different, but it's where we apply it and what's at stake in those applications, right? So if you all remember, Facebook used to conveniently tag people, although my wife is a proud non-Facebooker, so it kept trying to get it to be her mom, which she always hated. So anyway, this is just an example of image recognition technology, right? Facial recognition, Google Photos does it. It makes fun groupings of pictures of my cats. It's great. So here it's benign, right? Some people have problems with this, some people not. For planning, we do this all the time, right? Automatic license plate readers, traffic congestion cameras, things like that. It's getting a little 1984-ish. We're not quite there yet. But then we start using it to track people across the city, right? and see where they're going and what they're doing. And at each level of this, something very different is at stake with the technology and the ways in which we're using it. And so I'm a big AI advocate. I wouldn't keep doing this if I wasn't. But the ways in which we apply these things really do have a lot of impacts on how people perceive them and what folks think the benefits are. I did the normal academic thing. I have 38 slides for a 10-minute presentation. So I'm gonna breeze through a whole bunch of these. This is a really nice, Sagar was picking up on different ways to regulate AI, different calls, different business practices, things like that. There's a great article from the Harvard Berkman Klein Center that looks at I think about 110 of these different statements from governments, from companies, from nonprofits, and tries to look at what are the anxieties and what are the things that folks are talking about in this space. It's kind of fun. I decided to write a book with a bunch of people about this to try to educate our undergraduates. They don't listen to me anyway, so I don't know why I thought writing a book would help. That's all about how to think through these applications of technology from sort of a philosophical and moral background, and we illustrate this using a lot of science fiction stories, which is really fun, which I wrote this during the pandemic, so sans pandemic, there wouldn't have been a book. That was kind of fun. And I think a lot of the things that folks are really seeing these days is, stuff that is going wrong in the ways that we apply these technologies. The first one here is actually a man in Louisiana who was detained for a crime in a city that he had never been to because of a false facial recognition match. Amazon, and I'm not just want to single out Amazon, I think almost every job that you apply to on the internet at this point, which includes everything from McDonald's up to my university, is using some type of resume screening tool, is using something like ChatGPT to extract things, and a lot of times is using information, that kind of information, to try to make calls. And then there's also opportunities to use ChatGPT for mental health services and not tell people that you're using ChatGPT. That doesn't go very well. And these are all sort of the terrible things that can happen. And I don't, there's all kinds of other stuff. I'm going to flip through a lot of slides. These are a bunch of other examples, places, non-traditional finance. Anytime you hear the word non-traditional finance, please run, unless you work in non-traditional finance. Don't hate me. So people ask me, what can AI do now? I think Sagar and Tom have really covered a lot of that stuff. And a lot of this, especially the applications that we're seeing nowadays is really coming from this idea of machine learning, right? Machine learning is the idea that you're going to take data from the past and use it to predict the future. Right? And by predict the future, I mean, what is the next word in this sentence? What is traffic going to look like in an hour? What is the likelihood that this person is to reoffend? All of these applications where we're using machine learning, we're taking data that looks backwards, and then we're using that to guess the future. And so the places where these things can go wrong is any situation where looking backwards might not be the best indicator of the future. So whenever you're thinking about whether or not you should use a machine learning tool for something, just ask yourself that question. Same thing goes for something like ChatGPT, which is trained on all the words on the internet. I know many well-adjusted people who grew up only reading all the words on the internet. There's nothing controversial there at all. And using that to try to generate new things. And that's how you get some of these things that Tom and Sagar have brought up, is this just requirement that you have this past data. So a lot of this stuff comes from the data. You need computing power. You need a lot of money, to train these things. And that kind of leads to some of the problems and some of the things that we're trying to address. I think at Tulane, we've got this new center that's funded through the Office of Research for Community Engaged AI. And I think Sagar picked up on one of the goals that we have is really trying to, deal with the idea that a lot of these AI systems are developed by very large companies. You might ask yourself, why are they developed by very large companies? I believe ChatGPT 3.5 training runs cost $50 million in electricity, just the electricity, not the payroll, not the anything else, the electricity to train that model, not use it, to train it, $50 million. I don't know about you, but I could use $50 million for our center, which we don't have. And so what we want to do really though, is we want to try to engage communities in understanding what are their needs, what are the possibilities of these tools, and how do we create these tools in a way that takes into account, their data ownership requirements, their concerns, and their things like that. So again, there's a lot of much longer, like I said, 30 slides worth of stuff here. And again, we can kind of do different things with this, right? The ideal is to get to some point of collaborative exploration where we're working with those communities to prioritize that local knowledge and to really have active involvement in those projects. And I'll give you a few examples of these. There's a really great one from New Zealand around indigenous languages, if you're really into that. This is you always have to have a graphic in academic land. So we've been running a series of workshops in New Orleans with a lot of community partners that are really looking at data. Court Watch NOLA, Women with a Vision, and the Data Center are big partners of ours to help us run these workshops to try to look at things. Some of the fun stuff that we've been working on with a lot of students, language models, which I believe the city of Baton Rouge maybe has just come out. So if you want to have an interactive chat with what is the city council talking about. Turns out you can use these large language models to have a conversational interface. What is the city of New Orleans doing about homelessness? And using the text of, the city council meetings and that to really talk about it. You can even get videos down to the second. So this is a system that was built out with Ayub and Marvin from Ion Surveillance, which is a nonprofit in New Orleans. We're doing a lot of work with analyzing bond decisions in New Orleans criminal court. So a lot of this data exists on the internet in PDFs, which everyone knows are real fun to read. So going in there and really being able to extract that data and make it usable for the communities of interest, right? So that's how we do this through Court Watch NOLA. Integrating lots of data from lots of different open areas, right? Like so public records requests, volunteer court observations, and using that to build out dashboards that allow Court Watch to look at how these decisions are being made in real time in the city, which is something that they didn't have before. There's a lot of other stuff. We've been working with the city on, oops, that's not what I wanted. Come on, you, there we go. City of New Orleans IT on some of their open data initiatives that they already had going. We've been doing a lot of stuff around bias in hiring, which I'm going to flip through because I put too many slides in here. Looking at how bias can affect these things. I have a big project with the NSF with Kiva, which is a microfinance organization. We're looking at how to help global financial equity through some of the stuff that they do there. That's a bit more international, not so much local. We're doing a lot of stuff with public health. Looking at supportive communities for mental health from usually a lot of data from Reddit, looking at what folks are doing there. We've also been doing this with schools. This is also a project through the city of the Reach Center for Public School Choice in New Orleans. And there's a bunch of other cool stuff. This is a woman that I worked with for a while named Heather who does animal counting and population migration, right? Using aerial photography to keep track of where the penguins are and what the threats for them are. There's a great team up at, Milland used to be at USC, now he's at Harvard, doing a lot of AI for HIV prevention, using ideas from social network analysis to really look at how do we address these problems within the communities and how do we connect those individuals, and then also using that for conservation and public safety. There's a lot of stuff around public safety and planning from the Team Core stuff here, which has been deployed at a lot of airports and ports internationally, which is pretty cool. And again, other stuff, the AI for Opt over here is my former boss back when I had an industry job, looking around optimization and planning. How do we do routes? How do we do tugboat routing? How do we look at logistics and planning writ large, and how do we optimize that using AI? And then a couple things I think we'll get to in the questions here around using especially some of this aerial photography or even flood forecasting for planning, which we'll come back to. So again, these are all my cool colleagues at Tulane, and that's that. I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to all the panelists. So I want to dive into a couple of questions, and we're going to have room for you to ask questions as well. So I want you to kind of think through those questions before we get to you. But I want to start with, and I saw from one of your slides, Nick, the public health implications and how AI relates to that. Can you speak more to that? I saw there HIV prevention, detecting cancer, and medical images. As you think through that topic and even other equity topics, transportation topics, how does it all correlate to public health overall?
That's a really good question. I'm not an expert in the public health space. I work with some great people who are, but I think public health has a long history of doing these kinds of community engagement and trying to do lots of things like count people, look at their living conditions, look at what are the situations that they're in, and we can use a lot of these AI tools to integrate more of that data over larger areas. And I think Tom even touched on this with the scanning the buildings, using the truck videos, right? So a lot of this, I think a lot of opportunities at the intersection sort of planning and public health really come from the ability to analyze what I'm going to use a big CS word for a second, unstructured data, right? So things that are not just stuff in an Excel worksheet, but using video streams, using natural text, using video, using audio recordings and things like that to extract the signals that you need to understand things about public health, about the situations that folks are living in and stuff like that.
I'll add a couple of things. I'm seeing public health from the context of how planners see public health in terms of social determinants of health. So it can be active living or food systems planning or environmental health, etc. And I see sort of a lot what Nick and Tom said, implications in planning. Let's say example, transportation, right? Yesterday we had a session on quick build, and I think Mayor is here. They emphasize storytelling based on data. Data is, and we asked our members, what is the USP of planners? And many of them, two things. One is we can think about the future, and then we are data-driven profession. And that is where AI can play a huge role. And I also believe that all policy is health policy. I'm biased towards health. So anything that planners do, you are trying to influence health. So when it comes to transportation planning in terms of improving intersections, AI can be, computer visioning can be used to do that, right? To prevent accidents and killing people. Another example is when I was doing my research, biggest issue was like, yes, we look for access to parks, right? And we use GIS to measure distance, etc. But we do not know the quality of the parks. How do we do that? Like, if you are doing a regional study, you cannot go to each and every park and see, hey, these are the things that are there, these are the things not there, quality, street light, etc., etc. Those things can be taken care for by AI. So we get very refined, good quality data, which we can use in our analysis to improve health. Another example is access to healthcare, right? AI. We saw during COVID, and now we see telehealth being used a lot, and that is sort of, AI is being integrated into telehealth. So yeah, those type of things are really, really helpful to planners, and we can use it in various phases.
Let's talk a bit about some of the legal implications as we think through AI. I know we all kind of pose that ethical, broad question, right? But looking back to Louisiana, I know we passed a law, I think in 2022, that really defines kind of that right of publicity and how we use images online. Can one of you kind of speak to that? I know we're seeing some laws being developed in California and other states as well. So where are we at from a legal perspective as we think through AI?
Okay. Yeah, I think legally, it's sort of interesting because a lot of AI regulation is really around, I think, data, because I think that's something, I'm not a legal professional either, but I'll say things. But it's, who owns data, who owns the ability to train these models? And you're seeing a lot of this with the New York Times and other major media outlets suing ChatGPT and Microsoft for pulling that data from the internet and then using that for training. I think it's going to be a really interesting future of, who owns the data? Do individuals? And I think in the U.S. broadly, we don't. We're a little bit behind Europe and other places that kind of view that data as a property right. Louisiana's ahead of the game in some ways for ideas of video and publicity, but it's tough, and I see the data piece as really the most interesting piece, but then in other areas, I think there's a lot of ongoing discussions around who's responsible. I think Sagar brought this up, responsibility and accountability for a lot of these systems.
And I'll just emphasize what, I'll just add to what I shared during my presentation as well, that we have seen trends in terms of more regulations being built. People are learning as, what do you say? I don't know the phrase, but it's like we are building the ship while we are flying sort of type of thing. People are trying to see. So there are a lot of policy recommendations. There is a lot of regulations around it, right? And I think, as I mentioned, EU is leading the charge and sort of people follow it in that case. So states are implementing regulations around deepfakes, for example, right? More than half the states wants to ban deepfakes, etc. So I think there is a lot of momentum there. But yeah, in terms of legality of it, I am not an expert of it, but there's a lot of momentum there.
As we talk to our planners in the audience, and Tom, I'll point to you first, can you just give them some quick practical tips of how they can incorporate AI into their daily tasks and how they can be more efficient as they plan and work with communities across the state?
I think the main thing that I recommend is really looking at the tasks that you're performing, and I think with AI, usually what we're looking for are where there's like pattern detection available, which usually involves having lots of data, maybe things that you're doing over and over again, which may there may be an opportunity to automate that. And so that's what I said, at the end of my presentation, when I was mentioned, what is planning and kind of what does a planner do? I think that's the important part, rather than somebody just saying, here's the hammer, go find a nail. And so, but then what that takes is you having some idea, okay, I found where I'm doing plan review, and over again, I'm looking at side yard setbacks and heights of buildings and whatever it might be, and comparing it to sets of rules. Well, that's a perfect application, and those are starting to be developed. But so the challenge is it takes some knowledge, I think, ahead of time of kind of knowing what you're looking for within the type of work that you're doing, so that you can then say, yeah, here's the right tool for me. So it's just going to, like with any other kind of innovation adoption, it's going to take us a little bit of time, and there's learning involved.
Let's open up for some audience questions. I know we're almost at time for this session, but we'd love to hear from the audience. Any questions around AI, maybe from the presentations, or just other questions in your daily work as planners?
All right, I'm swimming a little bit, but AI, I guess, day to day for me is helping draft appropriate emails in touchy situations, and using a third-party system for meeting minutes and meeting notes, right? But as it develops and we grow and start using it for overlays, I'm going to use just the LSU Atlas GIS system as a basis here, right? There's a lot of data, social economic data, overlays, wetlands, whatever you need, you can pull that GIS data and bring it into software today. But from an AI perspective, all of this is being done at this point at a much higher level. $50 million just to generate the knowledge, the basis. How far are we from, at the state level or university levels, being able to do more localized data compilations, to where that data is more accurate and you don't have the variances and like I mentioned earlier, the racial discrepancies and that kind of stuff. So timeline, I guess, is question one, and the other part of that is that all that information being implemented at more of a site regional design perspective and being able to be utilized effectively.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. And a couple of examples that come to mind are the National Zoning Atlas. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, which I think they've got, right now they have, I think, areas zoned that cover about 50 million Americans. And so they're trying to roll this out on a national basis. There's also another project in California, which is having digitized all of the comprehensive plans. And so I mentioned those two, zoning and comprehensive plans, and then certainly we've got building regulations and guidelines and environmental areas and all that, which are going to come together into these systems to be more accessible, and like you're saying, in kind of an overlay kind of, or searchable sort of format. But again, this is, the big part of AI with the data. It's gonna take us the time to get that, all put together. And so some areas probably faster than others.
And I would just add very quickly, and maybe Nick, you can add to this, but recently there has been, exactly to address your concerns in terms of it is learning what so much data that is not sort of localized. There is a call for like small language models where we are able to control in terms of what kind of information AI learns rather than learning it from the information, trillions of data or information out there. So that is something that that is coming up, and I think more cities have started thinking about small language models which are trained internally by the people in the city.
Yeah, and that's one of the project with Ion Surveillance, that's what we did. There's some of these smaller models that are what are called pre-trained that you can get from Meta. Facebook has one of the open ones. And then you can do sort of what's called local fine-tuning on that, so on a corpus of data that you're interested in. So exactly that project with Ion Surveillance, that's what we did, right? So we can take, in some sense, from some of the more open source models, all of the money that they spent to build that, and then we can capture it, we can use it, and we can say, okay, well, we want to use it for this specific thing, right? And so when you ask, is it coming, like, that's a big business plan for these folks, and it's a big part of what we're trying to do, is bring that expertise to a lot of communities. That we do. Yeah. So we did that, like, earlier this year. With senior undergraduates and 2 really good software engineers. I don't want to undermine that. It still does take a fair amount of technical expertise, but that's where we're moving toward.
And I think a fascinating question related to this is what we're moving towards is digitalization of everything. Having all of the information in there, and like what we're referring to as digital twins, having a 3D virtual copy of urban spaces that then we can look at them and say, what if we change this? What if we change that? And what are the impacts going to be? Lots and lots of data. But real quick, I don't know how many of you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but there's a part in there where there's deep thought. It's basically an AI machine that gets trained for 7 million years on all of the information that's out there. And so then they asked deep thought, so we're going to ask you, since you know everything, since you have all the data, what's the meaning of life?
The universe and everything.
What's it all about now that you got all that data? And the answer was 42. And it's like, and then I don't know, I forgot what the question even was. So I think, yeah, I mentioned that. I think it's funny, but on the other hand, it's like, where are we headed with all of this energy, our own labor and energy and the $50 million for these models? What are we trying to accomplish? So.
Well, I think on that note, we are at time. Please give our panel a round of applause. They're doing some amazing work in this space. I believe Camille is going to close out this session. Camille?
Sorry, y'all got Jessica. Camille needed to step out, but thank you all. I just have a quick announcement. After our break, please return at 1:30 for our final sessions. We have some great offerings to end our time together at the summit. In this theater, we will have from placemaking to placekeeping, harnessing unique assets for community revitalization, and we will have a super fun cultural element to kick that session off. And in the workshop, we'll be building assets and opportunities through community benefit agreements. So please enjoy our last sessions, and thank you for being here.